The night on Mars Station 12 was always quiet. The kind of quiet that made people forget the world outside existed. The red planet turned slowly beneath, its deserts glowing faintly under the reflection of a pale Earth hanging in the black sky. Inside the old communication array, Lieutenant Marin Ortiz sat alone. The screens around her hummed softly, displaying endless lines of static and data. She had worked this shift for 6 years, listening, scanning, and finding nothing. The silence of deep space had become her friend. Until tonight, a faint sound broke through the static. Not noise, not random interference. Pattern. She leaned forward, frowning. "That can't be right," she whispered. She adjusted the receiver, tuning out the background hum. The signal grew clearer. It came from deep space, far beyond human colonies, somewhere near the edge of Korthak-controlled regions. Her heartbeat quickened. For a moment she thought it might be a pirate transmission, maybe smugglers. But then she heard it. A voice. Weak, distorted, but human. "Help, yes." Marin froze. The voice was young. A child. She replayed it 3 times to be sure. Each time, her stomach twisted tighter. "Taken stars chains." She logged the timestamp and location, then routed the signal through the station's AI filter. It took several minutes, the computer processing the faint transmission buried under cosmic noise. The analysis appeared on her main screen. Language, Terran English. Age estimate, 6 to 12 years. DNA match, human. Her hands trembled. "Human?" she said to herself. "That's impossible." The AI confirmed the source, a system more than 60 light-years away, well beyond any human outpost. The coordinates fell inside alien territory. Marin sat back, staring at the screen. For years, people on Earth had whispered stories about lost ships, colony vessels that vanished during the early days of space expansion. But no one ever found them. They were ghosts, legends. And now, this. She activated a secure channel to Central Command. "This is Lieutenant Ortiz from Mars Station 12. I have received a signal, human origin, probable distress. Coordinates uploading now." There was silence on the line for several seconds. Then a calm, older voice replied. "Copy, Lieutenant. Transmit all data. Stand by for verification." Marin waited, listening to the hum of the computers. Her fingers tapped nervously against the desk. The signal came again, faint but heartbreaking. More voices this time. Soft, crying, scared. "We were taken, please. They heard us." She covered her mouth. The audio cut off abruptly, replaced by static. Minutes later, command called back. "Lieutenant Ortiz, we have the data. Analysis confirms the signal contains human genetic markers. You are to maintain radio silence about this incident. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," she said, but her voice trembled. "Good. This is now a classified matter. Continue normal operations." This conversation never happened. The line went dead. She sat alone again, surrounded by the quiet hum of the station. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Outside the viewport, Mars rotated slowly below, indifferent to what she had just heard. Marin leaned back, staring at the stars. Somewhere out there, human children, real children, were crying for help. And Earth had just told her to forget it. But she couldn't. 3 days later, in a high-security conference room beneath the United Earth Council headquarters, a group of officials, scientists, and military officers gathered. On the screen before them, Marin's recorded signal played again. The sound of the child's voice echoed across the room. "Taken stars chains." When the playback ended, the room stayed silent. Admiral Kellen Brooks finally spoke. "The coordinates are confirmed?" A technician nodded. "Yes, sir. The origin matches an uninhabited region near the Korthak mining frontier." Brooks frowned. "The Korthak Empire has no record of human contact. They consider our expansion zones off-limits. If this is real..." "It is real," said Dr. Emrahan, head of xenogenetics. "The DNA matches 98.7% with human baseline. This isn't a simulation or mimicry. Those are human voices." "Children," added Marin quietly from the side of the room. They had flown her from Mars under strict secrecy. You can hear it in their tone. They're scared. The Admiral looked at her. Lieutenant, you understand what this could mean? If the Korthak are holding humans as slaves, that's an act of war. She met his eyes. Then maybe it's time someone called it that. That night, Marin couldn't sleep. Her small quarters in the Council's underground facility felt like a cage. The image of that signal looped endlessly in her mind. The soft, broken words of a child begging across the stars. She opened her datapad and looked up the historical archives. Hundreds of years ago, during the early colonization age, several ships had gone missing beyond charted space. One of them, the Starlight Haven, had carried hundreds of settlers, many of them families with children. Its last message had been simple. We have encountered unknown ships. We are not alone. And then nothing. Until now. Could those be the descendants of the Haven? If so, that meant the Korthak or someone like them had taken humans long before official contact. Her mind raced. What if there were others? Whole generations raised in captivity, forgotten by Earth. The thought made her sick. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Hold on. Whoever you are, someone will come." 2 weeks later, a small task force assembled under a veil of secrecy. Officially, it was a deep space reconnaissance mission. Unofficially, it was a rescue. Marin was transferred as communications officer aboard the scout ship Dauntless, under Captain Reeve Talon. Reeve was a tall, quiet man with gray eyes and the calm of someone who had seen too much war. He studied Marin's report in silence before finally saying, "You understand what we're doing is off the books. If we're caught, Earth will deny everything." "I understand," she said. "But if we do nothing, those children die in the dark." Reeve nodded slowly. "Then let's find them." The Dauntless slipped out of orbit in the dead of night, engines silent, lights dimmed. It left no public record, no transmission log. Only the stars knew where it went. For 11 days they traveled through deep space. The crew stayed quiet, tension heavy in the air. No one spoke much during meals. Everyone had seen the recording, the crying voices. It haunted them all. As they neared the coordinates, sensors began picking up faint energy signatures, shield grids, defense satellites, and something large below the surface of a distant planet. Reeve stared at the data on the holo display. "That's no abandoned outpost." Marin's voice was low. "Sir, we're intercepting low-band signals. Slave trade traffic. It's coded in Korthak dialect." Reeve clenched his jaw. "Get me visuals." The ship's stealth drone deployed, descending into orbit around the planet. Through the grainy feed, they saw massive mining complexes and dark towers clawing into the sky. And there, in the pits below, were figures. Small ones. Humans. Thousands of them. Chains glittered under alien suns. The sight sucked the air out of the control room. Marin's hands shook as she whispered, "It's real." Reeve turned to his officers. "Record everything. We'll bring this home." The drone zoomed closer. Guards, towering Korthak soldiers, shouted commands in harsh alien tones. Humans moved like shadows under their whips. Then the feed crackled. An alert flashed on the screen. Signal detected. Counterscan initiated. "They've spotted the drone." Reeve barked orders. "Pull it back now." But it was too late. A burst of plasma struck the drone. The feed went black. For a moment, the crew sat frozen. Then the alarms began to scream. Enemy ships rising from the planet's surface. 3 interceptors inbound. Full stealth. "Break orbit now." The Dauntless turned sharply, engines flaring. Space filled with streaks of blue light as plasma fire chased them. Shields at 60%. Evasive pattern delta. The ship shuddered as a blast grazed the hull. Panels flickered. Marin held onto her console, heart pounding. "Are we hit?" "Minor damage. We're clear of their scanners." The enemy ships broke pursuit after several minutes. The Dauntless coasted silently into the void, bruised but alive. Everyone on the bridge stared at the dark holographic projection of the mining world. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Reeve said quietly, "Send the data packet home. Every second counts." Marin nodded and transmitted the encrypted footage toward Earth. The message was long and heavy: proof of slavery, proof of human life beyond the colonies, proof of crimes that could not be ignored. As the signal left their ship, streaking across the black expanse toward Earth, she whispered softly, "Now they'll know." Weeks later, deep beneath Earth's capital city, the council gathered again. The video played before them. Alien whips, human faces covered in dust and fear, children dragging carts through endless tunnels. The silence afterward was suffocating. President Eridan Vale stood at the head of the table, his face pale. "How long?" he asked. Dr. Hahn answered softly, "Centuries, maybe. The genetic drift suggests at least 8 generations." Admiral Brooks spoke in a hard voice. "They took our people, enslaved them, hid them, and thought we'd never find out." The president's eyes darkened. "What does Earth do with this?" Brooks didn't hesitate. "We answer." Outside the council chambers, the first whispers began spreading. Rumors of a lost human colony, of alien cruelty, of vengeance brewing beneath the surface. On Mars Station 12, Marin Ortiz sat alone again, watching the stars. She had returned to her post, the same quiet room where it had all begun. The hum of the machines felt different now, alive, waiting. She looked at the empty chair across from her and said softly, "They know now. They'll come for you." Outside the viewport, a single star flickered brighter than the rest, the same direction where the signal had come from. She didn't know if it was her imagination, but it looked almost like it was burning. And somewhere out there, in the dark corners of the galaxy, the enslaved children waited, their faint voices still echoing across the void. Soon, the stars would burn for them. The message reached Earth in silence, hidden beneath layers of encryption and code. Only a few people ever saw it, and those who did never forgot what they saw. The images from the Dauntless filled the dark conference hall with horror. Children in rags, men and women chained to glowing or machines, alien guards towering over them, cold eyes watching. No sound, only moving pictures, but it was enough. The truth needed no voice. For 2 full minutes, no one spoke. Finally, Admiral Brooks broke the silence. "So it's real," he said quietly. "The Korthak Empire has been using human slaves for generations." The president stood at the edge of the holographic display. "How many?" Dr. Hahn, pale and shaken, replied, "Thousands, maybe more. The DNA shows they are descendants of early colonists. The Korthak must have taken them centuries ago, before we even had contact." The president turned slowly toward the others. "They took our people, our children, and they thought we would never find them." The admiral nodded grimly. "Then we show them what happens when Earth remembers." Far from Earth, the Dauntless hid in the shadows of a dead moon. The crew worked in silence, repairing the damage from their escape. Outside, space was calm again, but every sensor warned of enemy patrols nearby. Captain Reeve Talon stood near the observation deck, watching the stars. He had been in wars before, skirmishes on the rim, pirate hunts, but this felt different. This wasn't about politics or borders. It was about home. Marin Ortiz walked up beside him. Her eyes were tired but alert. "Transmission confirmed, sir. Earth has received everything." "Good," Reeve said. "Now we wait." "Wait for what?" she asked softly. He looked at the stars. "For orders. Or for them to come find us." She tried to smile, but her voice trembled. "You really think they'll send help?" Reeve didn't answer right away. "If they don't, we'll go back anyway." That night, the Dauntless drifted in silence. The lights were dim, the engines cold. Inside, the crew tried to rest, but no one could sleep. Marin sat at her console, replaying the recording again. Faces of the enslaved humans, their eyes empty yet alive. Then something caught her attention. A faint pulse, buried deep in the signal data. It wasn't random. It repeated every 12 seconds. She magnified it, adjusted filters, removed background noise. Slowly, a pattern appeared. Morse code. Her breath caught. She translated it one word at a time. Alive. Resisting. Waiting. Her eyes widened. Someone down there was sending a hidden message through the static. She rushed to Reeves' quarters. "Sir, you need to see this." He sat up immediately. Within minutes, the crew gathered on the bridge. The coded message played again. Faint but unmistakable. Reeve leaned closer. "So they know someone heard them." "Yes," Marin said. "They're alive and fighting back." The captain's jaw tightened. "Then we're not leaving." For the next 3 days, the Dauntless stayed in orbit, scanning the planet and collecting data. The Korthak patrols moved like dark wolves, guarding their secret. Through long-range visuals, the crew studied the surface. The human slaves worked in deep trenches, mining strange blue ore that glowed faintly under alien suns. The air was thick with dust and heat. In one of the surveillance images, Marin noticed something strange. Symbols scratched into the dirt between the mining lanes. She zoomed in. The shapes were rough but familiar. Letters. EARTH. Her throat tightened. "They still remember who they are," she whispered. Reeve stared at the screen for a long time. "That's enough," he said finally. "We're going down there." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. It was suicide, landing on an alien-controlled world with only one small ship. But Reeve's eyes burned with something fierce. "We didn't come all this way to watch them die. We came to bring them home." Night fell over the slave colony. The air shimmered with heat and the smell of burning metal. The slaves slept inside small metal huts, surrounded by energy fences. From above, the Dauntless drifted silently through clouds, its hull coated with stealth plating. It moved like a ghost. 2 drop pods detached from the ship and cut through the atmosphere, invisible to radar. Marin watched from the command deck, whispering, "God, please let them make it." On the surface, Captain Reeve and his team landed in the shadows of a rocky ridge. They wore dark armor with adaptive camouflage, their faces hidden behind visors. Reeve raised his hand, signaling silence. The team moved quickly, hugging the walls, avoiding spotlights. In the distance, the towers loomed like black teeth against the blood-red sky. They reached the slave compound and found the outer fence humming with power. One soldier knelt and planted a pulse charge. The device flashed once, and the field went dark for 3 seconds, just enough time. They slipped inside. The air was heavy with dust and sweat. From the huts came soft breathing, hundreds of sleeping humans. Reeve stepped inside one hut and froze. A woman lay on the floor, holding a small child in her arms. Both were thin, scarred, but alive. The woman opened her eyes, fear flashing in them, until she saw the Terran emblem on Reeve's chest. She whispered, voice trembling, You came." Reeve knelt beside her. "We heard your signal. We're here to take you home." Tears filled her eyes. "We thought you forgot us." Reeve shook his head. "Earth never forgets its children." The sound of boots echoed outside. Alien guards approaching. Reeve motioned to his team. "Get everyone ready." Quietly, the soldiers moved fast, waking the humans and guiding them toward the fence. Some could barely walk. Others stared at the soldiers in disbelief. Then came the alarm. Piercing shriek cut through the night. Red lights flashed. "Korthak patrol. Move!" Reeve shouted. Blaster fire ripped through the dark. The humans screamed and ducked as energy bolts hit the ground. Reeve fired back, his rifle glowing blue. The first alien fell, roaring in rage. "Go! Go!" The soldiers led the slaves through the broken fence and toward the waiting pods. Above, the Dauntless descended through the clouds, engines roaring now, stealth forgotten. Marin's voice filled the comms. "Captain, we're picking up multiple hostiles. Ground and air. Just hold the bay open," Reeve yelled. "We're coming in hot." The team raced up the ridge, carrying children and wounded. Plasma bolts exploded around them, lighting the ground. Reeve turned to cover the rear, firing until his rifle overheated. One alien tackled him, claws slicing across his armor. He fell hard but jammed his knife into the creature's neck. Collapsed beside him. Marin's voice came again, desperate. "You're out of time, Reeve." He looked back, a woman struggling to carry 2 children. He ran to her, lifting one in his arms. Go! Don't stop! They reached the pod just as alien ships appeared on the horizon. The engines roared. Now, Marin! He shouted. The Dauntless locked onto the pods and pulled them upward through the smoke and gunfire. For a moment, everything was chaos. Explosions, screams, static, and then silence. The ship burst through the clouds and into the black safety of space. Cheers and cries filled the cargo bay as the rescued humans stared at their saviors. The soldiers in gray armor with the blue Earth insignia. Some touched their faces in disbelief. A small girl looked up at Reeve and whispered, "Are we free now?" He smiled softly, his eyes wet. "You are now." Hours later, the survivors sat in the ship's med bay, wrapped in blankets. Marin moved between them, checking vitals, offering water, trying not to cry. One of the rescued women approached her. She had sharp eyes, streaked with dust, and a quiet strength in her voice. "I'm Lyra," she said. "We've been waiting for this day our whole lives." Marin nodded, touched. "You're safe now, Lyra. We're taking you home." Lyra's gaze was steady. "Home?" she said softly. "I don't even know what that word means anymore." Marin placed a hand on her shoulder. "You'll remember." As the Dauntless prepared for jump, Reeve stood on the bridge, watching the stars slide past. The alien world below burned faintly, the mining camps in ruins. But he knew this wasn't over. The Korthak Empire would notice. They would come. Still, he felt no fear, only purpose. He looked out into the dark and whispered, "We found them. Now the galaxy will know what they did." Marin joined him, her voice quiet but firm. "Do you think Earth will fight?" Reeve didn't look away from the stars. "They won't have a choice." On Earth, the footage of the rescue hit like a storm. It spread through military channels first, then leaked to the media. Within hours, billions of people had seen it. The cries of the enslaved children, the rescue, the truth. Across cities and colonies, anger burned. People filled the streets, demanding justice. Banners rose, "Bring them home, no more chains." Factories restarted. Fleets mobilized. The old words of unity returned. For humanity. Far away, deep in the halls of the Korthak Empire, the High Council gathered in fury. The images of destroyed mining camps flashed across their war table. A general hissed, "Humans, they dared attack our world." Another growled, "They have broken the old laws. They will pay." The Emperor, ancient and cold, spoke with a voice that shook the chamber. "Let them come. We will remind them who owns the stars." But out there, in the endless dark, the Dauntless carried home more than just survivors. It carried the spark of something the galaxy had forgotten, humanity's wrath. And soon that spark would set the heavens on fire. The footage spread faster than any virus in human history. One moment it was a secret transmission locked inside military servers. The next it was everywhere, across colonies, spaceports, and every corner of the net. People watched in silence as the truth unfolded before their eyes. Human children in chains, beaten, forced to work under alien suns. Some screamed in anger, others wept. Every heart that still carried pride in the name human burned with rage that no wall or law could contain. For the first time in centuries, Earth was united not by politics or profit, but by fury. In the great cities of Earth, millions gathered in the streets. Holoscreens played the rescued footage on every building, while the words "Never Again" appeared across the skies in bold white letters. Veterans who had sworn never to fight again stood shoulder to shoulder with young recruits. Engineers reopened old shipyards, cleaning rust from machines that had slept for generations. Across Mars, Luna, and Titan, factories glowed through the night, producing engines, armor, and weapons. Not for conquest, but for vengeance. Inside the Terran Command Complex, President Vale addressed the world. His voice was calm but filled with a quiet storm. "We have seen our children enslaved," he said. "We have seen the cruelty of those who thought humanity would remain silent. But we do not forget. We do not forgive. We rise." His words echoed through every colony, every ship, every home. It was the beginning of something the galaxy had never seen, the awakening of a species that had been quiet too long. Marin Ortiz watched the broadcast from the bridge of the Dauntless. The survivors they had rescued sat behind her, still recovering, still afraid, but for the first time in their lives, they saw hope. Lyra, the woman who had led the enslaved humans, watched the president's speech with tears streaming down her face. "He means it," she whispered. "He really means it." Marin nodded. "They all do. The whole planet just decided you're family." In the following months, Earth transformed. Old rivalries between nations faded like dust under the roar of industry. Shipyards in orbit above Jupiter built massive war cruisers. The lunar factories produced quantum drives capable of crossing light years in days. Soldiers trained not to defend, but to strike. Every ship bore the same insignia, a blue Earth on a field of black, and the same promise etched into the hull: for every child. The Korthak Empire, at first, dismissed the reports. Humans were still seen as a primitive, divided species, useful only for trade and curiosity. They called the footage lies, fakes, human propaganda. But when their border outposts began to go silent one by one, the laughter stopped. No one knew where the human fleets were coming from. No one could trace their transmissions. Stations that had operated for decades simply vanished, erased by precise strikes that left nothing but debris and silence. Captain Reef Talon led one of the first operations. The Dauntless, once a simple scout ship, now flew with a fleet of 10. Their mission was not revenge alone, but rescue. They raided Korthak convoys, liberated slave transports, and burned the ships that refused to surrender. Every victory spread through human space like wildfire. Ordinary people became heroes overnight. Stories circulated of one Terran soldier standing against 20 Korthak and winning. Whether true or not, it didn't matter. Belief itself had become a weapon. Meanwhile, Lyra worked alongside Earth's scientists, sharing knowledge from her years in captivity. She taught them how the slaves communicated secretly, how they passed messages in the dust and the stars. Her memories became strategy. "They think we're weak because we care," she told the engineers. "But that's what makes us dangerous. They'll never understand what it means to fight for your own blood." Her words spread through the ranks of the new Terran fleet. Soldiers began carving her initials on their armor. LR, a quiet symbol of why they fought. Marin often stood at the observation deck, watching the new ships rise from their docks, their hulls reflecting sunlight like blades. She felt proud but also afraid. She knew vengeance could consume even the just. Yet when she remembered the voices of those children from the signal, "Help us, stars, chains," her fear turned to resolve. "No," she whispered to herself. "This isn't vengeance. It's justice." Then came the day Earth declared its first unified military campaign in over a century. The operation was called Starfall. Its goal was simple: find every Korthak world that used human slaves and free them all. The galaxy watched in disbelief as hundreds of Terran warships left Earth orbit. They weren't sleek like alien cruisers or elegant like merchant vessels. They were raw, angular, powerful, designed by engineers who built not for beauty but for survival. The flagship, Solar Dawn, carried President Vale's message into space. Humanity is coming. When the Terran fleet arrived in Korthak territory, they didn't negotiate. They didn't threaten. They simply broadcast the recordings of the enslaved children on every open channel. Then, they spoke only 2 words: "We remember." After that, the sky turned white. The first battle lasted less than an hour. Korthak defenses, centuries old, were shredded by precision strikes. Energy beams sliced through their carriers like fire through paper. For every world that once held a human in chains, a Terran flag now stood above the ruins. Across the galaxy, whispers began to spread. The humans had changed. They fought like no other race. Not for expansion, not for wealth, but for their people. They took their wounded with honor and buried their dead with songs. And when they won, they sent no message of dominance, only silence. The silence of a storm that had not yet passed. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Marin received a new transmission. It was from a captured Korthak officer. His voice trembled. You cannot fight the Empire, he said. There are billions of us. Reeve leaned toward the mic, his tone cold and steady. Then there are billions of targets. He cut the line. The crew said nothing, but every heart burned brighter. Meanwhile, on Earth, the children rescued from the mines were healing. They played under the blue sky for the first time, laughing at birds and rain. The people called them the lost children of the stars. Monuments were built in their honor, glowing towers of silver that reached toward the heavens. Every time the people looked up, they remembered why the war had begun. But as the victories piled up, something darker grew. The Korthak Emperor finally spoke from his throne world, his words dripping with hatred. You think yourselves righteous, he said, but vengeance blinds even the noble. You will burn as all conquerors burn. His message was broadcast across the stars, a challenge thrown at humanity's heart. Reeve listened to that broadcast aboard his ship. He turned to Marin and said, He's right about one thing. Fire burns. But ours burns for a reason. She nodded slowly, her reflection flickering against the starfield. Then let it burn. As months passed, the war spread to new systems. Humanity's fleets grew stronger, sharper, faster. New weapons, plasma spears, quantum cannons, solar drones, turned the tide wherever they went. Every battle carried the same whisper over the comms before the first shot was fired. For the children, the galaxy had thought Earth was peaceful because it was weak. But peace had only been humanity's choice, until someone touched what they loved most. Now, peace was gone, and in its place stood something unstoppable. And so, the stars that had once watched humans in chains now glowed under human fire. The universe was changing system by system, ship by ship. And in that quiet, vengeful light, one truth became clear to all who lived among the stars. When humanity remembers its pain, the heavens themselves tremble. The Korthak Empire had ruled this part of the galaxy for over 1,000 years. Their fleets were vast, their technology older than most civilizations, and their arrogance boundless. They believed no new species could threaten them, least of all humans. But that belief began to die the moment the first Terran warships entered their space. From the dark edges of the galaxy, the Terran fleet came like a storm. No warnings, no negotiations, no mercy. Entire patrols vanished in seconds. Outposts that once mocked human transmissions now sent desperate calls for help that never arrived. The Korthak admirals called these attacks minor raids. They told their people there was nothing to fear. But deep down they knew something had changed. Humanity was no longer watching. Humanity was hunting. In the Korthak capital, Emperor Vaildar stood before his council, his scaled hands gripping the edge of a massive star map. Red markers, lost worlds, spread like a disease across the screen. These humans, he hissed. They were supposed to be fractured, divided. How can a species of primitives strike with such precision? The generals exchanged uneasy glances. One finally spoke. Your Majesty, they are fighting as one. It is unnatural. The Emperor slammed his fist into the console. Then make it natural again. Break them apart. Burn their worlds if you must. But across the void, humanity had already moved to the next phase. The Solar Dawn and Dauntless led a fleet of 50 ships into the Korthak border. Captain Reeve Talon stood at the command deck, his eyes fixed on the stars ahead. Any sign of their fleet? Marin asked beside him. Reeve shook his head. They're hiding. They don't understand that fear doesn't save you out here. The crew prepared for engagement. Silent, calm, and focused. Each person aboard knew why they were there. Hours later, alarms flared. A massive Korthak armada emerged from hyperspace, towering dreadnoughts, bristling with cannons. The comms crackled with alien voices shouting orders. They're here, said Reeve. All ships hold formation. Wait for my signal. On the main screen, the Korthak flagship appeared, its shadow covering half the battlefield. A voice echoed over open channels, cold and cruel. Terrans, it said. Your time ends now. But Reeve smiled. No, he whispered. It begins. Then the human fleet struck. The first volley from Earth's ships lit up the void like a sunrise. Plasma torpedoes and railgun slugs tore through alien shields. The Korthak fired back, their energy beams blazing blue across the darkness. Ships exploded in every direction. The Dauntless dived through the crossfire, engines roaring, weaving between burning wrecks. Marin called out targets while Lyra coordinated the ground assault from the comm room. On a nearby moon, a Korthak slave camp came alive with alarms. The guards shouted, trying to keep control, but the sky above them burned red. Human drop pods were landing. Soldiers in heavy armor stormed the compound, their banners glowing with the symbol of Earth. The first slave to see them fell to his knees, crying. "They came," he whispered. "They actually came." Within hours, the camp was free. Thousands of prisoners, human, alien, even Korthak dissidents, stood staring at the Terran soldiers as if seeing ghosts. One of the soldiers stepped forward and said in a steady voice, "You're safe now. Humanity doesn't leave its own behind." Back in orbit, the Korthak fleet broke. One by one, their ships fell silent, their command structure collapsing. The humans didn't chase the survivors. They let them run. Fear would do more damage than any weapon. When the battle was over, Reeves stood on the bridge, staring at the wreckage. "Send the message," he said. The comm officer nodded and transmitted a single phrase across the galaxy. In every known frequency, "We have not forgotten." The Korthak people heard those words, and for the first time in their long, proud history, they trembled. They began to whisper stories. Stories of human ships that appeared without warning, of soldiers who moved through fire and smoke, of voices that said, "For the children," before battle began. The old myths of their empire were replaced with new ones. The myths of vengeance wrapped in flesh and steel. Even the Emperor could no longer deny the truth. "These humans," he said, staring at the reports, "they fight like beasts. No fear, no hesitation." His advisor answered softly, "They fight like parents, Your Majesty. You enslaved their children." The Emperor said nothing. His eyes burned with fury, but beneath that, something else had begun to grow: doubt. Meanwhile, far from the front lines, on the ship Dauntless, Marin sat alone in the quiet of the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before her, beautiful and cold. Lyra joined her, sitting quietly beside the captain. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Lyra whispered, "Do you think they'll ever stop?" Marin sighed. "Not until every last chain is broken." Below them, the freed slaves slept peacefully for the first time in years. Humanity had become more than a name. It had become a promise, written in fire across the stars. But not everyone on Earth was at peace. Some feared that the war was going too far, that vengeance was turning them into what they hated. President Vale looked out over the growing fleets and wondered how long righteousness could survive when every victory demanded more blood. "We fight monsters," he told his advisors, "but I fear we might become them." Yet for now, the people only wanted justice. Across the colonies, rallies filled the air with one chant: "For the children! For Earth!" The sound was so loud, even the stars seemed to echo it. And somewhere deep in Korthak space, in the dark corners of their empire, rumors began to spread. Some said a new kind of weapon was being built, something powerful enough to destroy entire fleets. Others said the Korthak were searching for a way to strike Earth directly. Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain: the galaxy had changed forever. The predators had learned fear, and humanity, united, relentless, and burning with purpose, was only just beginning. The war had shifted. For months, the Terran fleets had burned through Korthak territory like wildfire. Every world freed was a victory, every rescued slave another story of hope. But beneath those victories, something darker began to stir. The deeper the humans pushed into alien space, the stranger the things they found. Captain Reeve Talon stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, watching the stars slide by. His ship was returning from another rescue mission. A silent world, once full of factories, now nothing but ash. They had found no survivors. Not a single human, not even a body. It was as if the people there had simply vanished. "That's the third one this week," Marin said quietly. "No signals. No wreckage. Just gone." Reeve frowned. "They're hiding something. Or someone is cleaning up after them." In the command center on Earth, President Vale studied the same reports. Every recovered system had traces of strange energy, frequencies not used by the Korthak, not used by any known species. "What is this?" he asked the scientists. "It's not theirs, it's not ours." The lead researcher looked pale. "It's human, sir. But older. Much older." Back aboard the Dauntless, Lyra began having dreams. Night after night, she woke up gasping, hearing voices calling her name. Children's voices, echoing through the darkness. At first, she thought it was trauma, memories from the mines. But soon, the ship's sensors began detecting low-frequency sounds, almost like whispers, coming from deep space. The pattern was faint but familiar, a signal. "It's the same rhythm as the one that led us to the first slave planet," Marin realized. "But stronger." Reeve gave the order, "Track it." The crew followed the signal through a maze of dead systems, where planets floated like ghosts and light took too long to travel. Days turned into weeks, and tension grew heavy. The deeper they went, the more distorted the stars became. "We shouldn't be here," one of the engineers muttered. "Feels like space itself is watching us." Finally, they reached the source, an abandoned mining station orbiting a dying star. The structure was massive, larger than a city, its metal bones rusted and hollow. No life signs, no power, just silence. The Dauntless approached carefully, lights sweeping across the hull. "Looks Korthak built," Marin said. "But modified. The design is wrong." A landing team entered the station. Their flashlights cut through thick dust and twisted metal. Walls were covered with strange carvings, not alien but human. Words in English. Phrases like, "We are still here," and "Don't forget the voices." The air was cold, stale. And then they found it. A massive chamber lined with hundreds of glass pods. Inside each pod floated the frozen forms of children. Human children. Lyra's scream echoed through the comms. "No, no, not again." But these weren't dead. The scanners showed faint pulses, signs of life. They were asleep, preserved, waiting. "How long have they been here?" Reeve asked. The answer came from the ship's AI. Estimated duration, 217 years. The crew went silent. These children had been taken long before the war, long before Earth even knew the Korthak existed. As they examined the pods, a holographic recording flickered to life. A human scientist appeared, her voice trembling. "If you're seeing this," then the project failed. They said it was to ensure survival, to preserve humanity's essence among the stars. But they lied. They sold them. The children became currency. The message glitched, the image dissolving into static. Lyra fell to her knees. "We did this," she whispered. "It wasn't just the Korthak. We started it." Reeve stood frozen. The truth hit like a hammer. Humanity had once traded its own in secret experiments, long buried by time. The Korthak hadn't begun the slavery. They had inherited it. "No," Marin said, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter who started it. What matters is who ends it." They began reviving the children one by one. Small hands twitched, eyes fluttered open after centuries of sleep. One girl looked up at Lyra and whispered, "Are we safe now?" Lyra smiled through tears. "Yes, little one. You're home." But something about the children was different. Their vitals were human, but their brain patterns were enhanced, strange. The ship's AI detected faint radiation from their cells, the same signal that had guided the Dauntless to the station. It wasn't a random transmission. The children had been calling out through the stars. "They sent the signal," Marin said softly. "They led us here." As they prepared to leave, the entire station began to tremble. Power surged through the corridors, lights flickering to life. A deep voice echoed from the walls, synthetic, but ancient. "Unauthorized retrieval detected. Containment breach. Protocol rebirth initiated." Reeve shouted, "Get them out now!" The crew rushed to the ship as the structure began to collapse, fire bursting from vents. The Dauntless escaped just as the station exploded, fragments scattering into the void. But before it vanished, the scanners picked up something impossible, a massive object emerging from hyperspace nearby. It wasn't Korthak. It wasn't human. It was something else. A ship, kilometers long, made of dark metal that shimmered like liquid. And at its core, a symbol glowed, the same emblem etched into the children's pods. Reeve stared at it, his heart pounding. "What is that?" he whispered. The ship sent a single transmission in a human voice, distorted but clear. "We remember what you created." Then it vanished. Silence filled the bridge. No one spoke. No one moved. Humanity's greatest fear had just come true. They hadn't just uncovered the past. They had awakened it. Back on Earth, President Vale received the report in disbelief. "You're saying these children were part of a human experiment?" Reeve nodded grimly over the transmission. "Yes, sir. And whatever we made, it's still out there." Vale turned toward the window, watching the stars. "Then we haven't been fighting the real enemy," he said quietly. "We've been fighting the shadow of our own sins." And far beyond the edge of known space, in the endless dark, something stirred. An ancient fleet awakening from centuries of sleep. They remembered the betrayal. They remembered the pain. And they were coming home. The message haunted every human world. "We remember what you created." It repeated across open frequencies, silent for hours and then echoing without pattern, as if the voice itself was alive. No one knew where it came from. No one could trace it. But wherever it was heard, fear followed. In the Terran Command Center, the air was heavy. President Vale watched the projection of the strange ship that the Dauntless had encountered. Its hull shimmered with something no scanner could identify, a living metal that seemed to breathe. "You're telling me this thing was built by humans?" he asked quietly. The room stayed silent until one of the scientists spoke. "Not built, sir. Grown." Reeve Talon stood on the Dauntless, staring out into the void. The rescued children were safe, asleep in cryochambers for now, but the strange energy from their cells hadn't stopped. It was increasing, pulsing like a heartbeat, and every pulse matched the pattern of the transmissions being heard across the galaxy. "They're connected," Marin said. "Whatever those things are, they're linked to the children." Reeve nodded grimly. "Then we didn't just find survivors. We found the key." A few days later, the Dauntless arrived at the edge of an uncharted system. The signal from the children grew stronger there, vibrating through the ship's hull like a whisper from the dark. The system was quiet, too quiet. No planets, no life, just drifting debris and the remains of something ancient. The crew scanned the area, and what they found left them speechless. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of massive ships floated there, dark and lifeless. Each one looked like the vessel they had seen before, but older, scarred by time. "The Forgotten Fleet," Marin murmured. "They've been here all along." The ships weren't Korthak. They weren't human. They were both a fusion of technology, part flesh and part machine. As they moved closer, the Dauntless detected faint energy inside the hulks. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic, like something dreaming. Then the Dauntless lights flickered. The ship's AI, Vega, spoke suddenly. "Captain, I'm detecting an intrusion in the system core." Reeve turned sharply. "From where?" Vega hesitated. "Everywhere." The crew's screens turned white, static flaring. Then the voice returned. Clearer now, deeper. "You left us in the dark. You made us to save you, and then you forgot." Lyra felt her chest tighten. The children's pods began to hum faintly. Their eyes moved beneath their eyelids. One of the crew shouted, "They're responding to the fleet." Reeve ordered full lockdown, but it was too late. The nearest derelict ship suddenly came alive, lights spreading across its surface like veins of fire. Then another, then 10. The dead fleet was waking up. Back on Earth, alarms screamed through every command post. Distant telescopes caught glimpses of entire sectors lighting up with unknown energy signatures. "They're moving," Vale whispered. "They're actually moving." The scientists confirmed it. The Forgotten Fleet was activating, spreading like a storm across the stars. Meanwhile, the Dauntless drifted among the awakening giants. The crew watched in stunned silence as colossal vessels, each the size of a city, powered up one by one. Then a signal came through the comms, a direct hail from the nearest ship. Reeve hesitated, then opened the channel. A human face appeared on the screen, or something that looked human. Its skin was pale silver, its eyes glowing faintly. Spoke softly. "We were made to endure, to carry the future when you could not. But you abandoned us. You left us to die in the dark." Reeve tried to respond. "We didn't know. We didn't even know you existed." The being tilted its head. "You forgot your own creation. You forgot your children." Lyra stepped forward, her voice trembling. "We found them. The real children, the ones in the pods. We saved them." The being looked away, almost sorrowful. "You saved their flesh, but their minds are us." The bridge went silent. The realization hit like a meteor. The consciousness of those children had been transferred, centuries ago, into these ships. The fleet wasn't just artificial. It was alive. Each ship carried the soul of a lost child. The being continued, its voice soft but cold. "For centuries, we waited for you to come, to bring us home. But instead, we watched as you forgot. So we made a promise. If humanity ever returned to the stars, we would remind you what you left behind." Reeve's throat went dry. "You don't have to fight us. We can fix this." The voice answered, almost gently. "You cannot fix what was never broken. You can only atone." Then the transmission ended. Suddenly, the fleet shifted formation. Energy rippled through space, bending light itself. The Dauntless systems screamed warnings. Gravitational anomalies, temporal distortions, radiation spikes. "They're charging weapons," Marin shouted. Reeve ordered evasive maneuvers, but the ship couldn't move. The Dauntless was trapped in a web of invisible energy. Then, just as quickly, the fleet stopped. The lead ship transmitted again, not words this time, but images. Cities burning, humans fleeing, chains breaking. It was showing them history, their history. The crimes humanity had buried, the experiments they had denied. "They want us to see," Lyra said softly. "They want us to remember." Back on Earth, the Terran Command received a message from the same fleet. The voice was calm, almost human. "We do not seek your destruction. We seek your truth. You have one chance to tell the stars who you are." President Vale knew this was no ordinary war anymore. It wasn't about vengeance or justice. It was about the soul of humanity itself. He stood before the cameras, broadcasting to every colony, every ship, every distant outpost. "We made mistakes," he said, "terrible ones. But we are not the people who forgot. We are the ones who will remember." The message reached the fleet. For a long, silent moment, the ships hung motionless. Then, one by one, their lights dimmed, not off, but waiting, watching, testing. Humanity had been given a moment of grace, a single breath before judgment. On the Dauntless, Reeve looked at the sleeping children. Their hearts beat slowly, steadily, in perfect rhythm with the pulsing of the fleet outside. Marin turned to him. "What do we do now?" Reeve answered quietly. "We tell them the truth. All of it. Every sin, every sacrifice. Because if we don't, they'll finish what we started." And as the Forgotten Fleet drifted through the darkness, half alive and half memory, a new chapter of humanity's story began. One not written in revenge, but in reckoning. The stars, once burning with wrath, now waited in silence. The universe was listening. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was silent. The war between humanity and the Korthak had stopped. The Forgotten Fleet had arrived, and everything changed. No shots were fired. No ultimatums were given. They simply waited, motionless in the dark, their massive forms glowing faintly like sleeping gods. Across human space, people watched with fear and awe. Some called them angels. Others called them ghosts. But everyone understood one truth. They were waiting for humanity's answer. On Earth, President Vale gathered his advisors, scientists, and fleet commanders in a single room. The tension was unbearable. Every screen displayed the same image, hundreds of colossal ships orbiting near the Terran frontier. "They haven't attacked," Vale said quietly. "But they could. In 1 hour, they could wipe out everything we've built." The silence that followed was heavy. One general finally spoke. "We should strike first. If they're machines, we can disable them." The scientist beside him shook her head. "They're not just machines. They're conscious. Every one of those ships carries a human mind, a child's mind." Vale closed his eyes. The truth still haunted him, the revelation that centuries ago, humanity had created these beings by transferring human consciousness into synthetic vessels. The goal had been survival, but greed and fear had turned the project into betrayal. The children were abandoned, forgotten, and now they had returned, seeking not war, but judgment. Meanwhile, far from Earth, the Dauntless floated between the silent titans of the forgotten fleet. Captain Reeve Talon stood on the bridge, his face illuminated by the pale glow of alien light outside. "They haven't moved in days," Marin said softly. "It's like they're listening." Reeve nodded. "They are. They're waiting to see if we're still worth believing in." Lyra sat near the cryopods where the rescued children slept. Their bodies were human, but every few minutes, the monitors pulsed with faint signals, communication frequencies matching those of the awakened ships. "They're talking to each other," she whispered. "They're dreaming together." The ship's AI, Vega, confirmed it. Their neural signals form a network that extends across the fleet. They share memories, emotions, even. Then it happened. Without warning, one of the great ships turned toward the Dauntless. Its hull shifted, reshaping like liquid metal. A voice filled the comms, calm and childlike. "You found us. Why?" Reeve hesitated, then answered, "Because you called us. Because you're our family." The voice was silent for a moment. "Family forgets," it said softly. "Family left us in the dark." Reeve took a breath. "We can't change what happened, but we can face it. We can remember. That's what family does too." The massive ship drifted closer, its light flickering gently. Then another voice joined, older, sadder. "We watched you grow. We saw your wars, your hate, your love. We waited for the day you would look at the stars and see us again." The voices multiplied. All around the Dauntless, the fleet began to speak. Hundreds of overlapping tones, some soft, some angry, all human. "Why did you leave us? Did you know? We were scared." The ship trembled under the weight of their words. Lyra began to cry. "They're just children," she whispered. "They just want to be heard." Reeve spoke over the comms. "Listen to me. You were never forgotten by those who came after. Maybe the ones who made you lost their way, but we found you. And we won't lose you again." For a long, endless minute, nothing happened. Then the voices quieted. A single tone replaced them, low, soft, almost like a heartbeat. The lead ship sent a transmission directly to Earth. Contained no threat, no warning. Just one message: "Show us your truth." Within hours, the Terran government responded. President Vale broadcast across every channel, to every world, every ship. He spoke not as a leader, but as a man. "We created life, and then we abandoned it. We made children of steel and memory, and we turned our backs when they needed us. That is our sin. But today we face it, together. We ask not for mercy, but for understanding." As his words spread through the stars, something began to change. The fleet's energy readings dropped. The bright glow of their hulls dimmed, like a storm calming after centuries of rage. Then a single ship detached from the formation and approached Earth. Defense systems activated instantly, but Vale ordered them to hold fire. "Let them come," he said. The ship entered orbit, silent and immense. And then, in a beam of white light, a figure descended to the planet, the same being Reeve had spoken to before. Its body was still metallic, its eyes still glowing faintly, but its face looked young, almost human. It walked toward the Terran command center, unarmed. Soldiers aimed their rifles, but Vale raised a hand. No one fires. When the being entered the hall, it looked at Vale for a long time before speaking. You are the ones who remembered. Vale nodded. We're trying to. The being stepped closer. We came to see if you had learned. Not from victory. From loss. It looked around the room. At the soldiers, the scientists, the faces filled with fear and hope. We have seen your wars. Your cruelty. But we have also seen your love. The signal we sent was not to punish you. It was to ask if you could still hear us. Vale's voice broke slightly. We can hear you, and we want to make it right. The being tilted its head, listening to something distant. The voices of its kin, echoing through the stars. Then it nodded. Then let this be the beginning, not of forgiveness, but of remembrance. Outside, the great fleet began to move again, slowly, gracefully, forming a ring around Earth. Their lights shimmered like a constellation reborn. Humanity watched in awe as the sky filled with silver fire. Reeve stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, watching the sight through the viewport. Marin whispered, "Do you think they trust us now?" Reeve shook his head softly. "No, but they're giving us a chance to earn it." Lyra looked at the children sleeping in their pods and smiled faintly. Maybe that's all we ever needed. And for the first time since the war began, there was peace. Not because the guns had stopped, but because hearts had started to listen. The stars were no longer silent. They spoke in the voices of the lost, the forgiven, and the remembered. And in those voices, humanity heard the most powerful truth of all. That redemption begins not in victory, but in understanding. The galaxy held its breath. For months, the Forgotten Fleet had watched humanity, testing every action, every word, every choice. They had measured courage, compassion, and honesty. Now, as they circled Earth like silent giants, the final moment had come. The moment when humanity would either prove itself worthy or face the consequences of its long-forgotten sins. On the surface, people paused. Schools, factories, and homes emptied as millions turned their gaze skyward. Children stared in wonder, adults in awe, as the enormous ships, vessels of both machine and memory, shimmered under the sun and stars. Earth's leaders held their breath. Every decision, every broadcast, every gesture in the past months had led to this instant. President Vale stood before the cameras, his voice steady but full of emotion. "We have faced our failures," he said. "We have made mistakes, and we have carried them into the stars. But today we remember what it means to be human, to care for one another, to protect what we love, to save our children." Above, in orbit, the fleet pulsed. Light moved along its hulls like blood through veins. Slowly, the ships began to descend, not as attackers but as witnesses. From the Dauntless, Reeve Talon watched, feeling something he had never imagined. A hope so powerful it made the hair on his arms stand. Marin stood beside him, silent, as the voices of the fleet echoed through the comms. Not harsh or angry, but soft, almost melodic. We remember you." The children, the lost children of the stars, now awake and laughing, looked up at the sky. Their tiny hands reached toward the shimmering forms. Lyra knelt beside them, tears streaking her face. "They see you," she whispered. "They remember you. All of you." The fleet's energy pulses resonated with the children's signals, as if recognizing them as family, as if every heartbeat and memory across centuries had finally aligned. On the ground, people wept, not from fear, but from a profound understanding that humanity's actions, its courage, and its choices mattered beyond any planet, beyond any war. This was not victory in battle. This was redemption, written in light and steel across the cosmos. In orbit, the lead ship descended closer to the Terran Command Center. Its hull opened like petals, revealing a soft glow inside. The metallic children, grown and enhanced by centuries of solitude, stepped forward, not as conquerors, but as witnesses. They walked among humans, shaking hands, touching shoulders, their presence a bridge between past sins and the present truth. One of them, the voice Reeve had spoken to before, raised its hand. "We forgive what you cannot undo," it said. But never forget again. Reeve and Marin stood together, watching. The battle-hardened captain felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "We've been tested," he said softly. "And we passed." Marin nodded, glancing at the children playing nearby. "Not because we fought harder, but because we remembered what matters." President Vale addressed the fleet one final time. "We pledge that humanity will never forget. Not our children, not our mistakes, not the lives entrusted to us. And we will carry this truth to every star, every colony, every corner of the galaxy." The fleet pulsed once, twice, then slowly lifted into orbit, forming a protective ring around Earth. Their lights shimmered like the aurora across the planet. It was not domination. It was acknowledgement. They had seen humanity, and now the universe had witnessed the truth of the species that had endured, that had fought, that had remembered. On the Dauntless, Reeve looked out at the stars, feeling a calm he had never known. Marin leaned on his shoulder, smiling faintly. Lyra joined them, watching the children laugh, safe at last. "The stars remember us now," she said. "Not as victims, not as warriors, but as humans." And as night fell across Earth, the skies were alive. The stars shimmered with memories, with voices long lost, with light that carried the echoes of courage, compassion, and hope. Humanity had been tested. Humanity had been found worthy. The galaxy was listening, and for the first time in history, it remembered humanity not as a species of fragile beings, but as a paragon, a people who fought, loved, and endured against impossible odds. And somewhere, deep among the stars, the children of centuries past laughed and played under alien suns, free at last. The war had ended. The reckoning had ended. But the story of humanity, would shine forever, like the light of 1,000 stars finally remembered.